Well, hey, welcome to the Conversations podcast, where we believe conversations create change. We are your hosts, Mike and Steph, and welcome to episode 2. Babe, how you feeling?
I am so excited. I can't believe we're here. We got through episode number 1.
We did.
And now we're here in episode number 2. And I just want to say, I am so thankful for your love and your support. It means the absolute world to us that you would embark on this journey with us.
That's right. So please do us a favor. Subscribe to the YouTube page, follow us on the Instagram, and join us in on the conversation. But babe, I'm extremely excited to do episode 2 with you.
Yeah.
We got episode 1 out of the way. We unpacked what conversations create change, the vision behind it, why we started. But I'm really, really excited about today's conversation specifically. But I was doing some thinking. I think we should probably let our listeners in on our day today.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, my favorite part of the day?
Your favorite part of the day, because you have a new obsession.
Okay, we have a new obsession.
No, you have a new obsession.
I think it's pretty equal.
I don't. You watch videos, you watch film, you study this, you DM the players.
That's not true.
You asked them to be I've seen it. They literally reposted your DM.
That was the Orlando Squeeze team.
Yes.
And it's because I posted a mug, which is my favorite mug from them.
Yeah, okay, well, cat's out of the bag. You are obsessed with pickleball.
Yes.
We are obsessed with pickleball.
We are.
And today we played.
We did.
And we kind of dominated.
No, we didn't dominate. Let's be real. We lost the games that we played together.
That's true.
But when we played separate, I won a game without you.
Okay, so then let me ask you this question. Do you think you're better than me in pickleball?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm better than you.
Yeah.
When we play 1-to-1, who wins the most?
I do.
Oh, that's such a lie. I win almost every 1-to-1 game, and then you make me play again, okay? To tire me out.
And then sometimes I win.
Hit or miss.
Okay.
Anyway.
You are a fantastic pickleball player.
Thank you, love.
Your serve is unstoppable.
Thanks.
You really have a really strong hit. And I'm jealous of it.
Thanks.
But we are learning some valuable lessons on the court.
We are.
Which I really think is going to transition us to our conversation today. Because we had a bit of a
rough patch
while we've been playing.
When we first started playing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we really struggled with communication on the court. Who knew that communication was important when you were playing pickleball? I did not. But there's this one sweet spot like on the court.
Yeah.
Whenever the opposing team, they hit the ball. If they get it right in the center to the back of the line, it confuses the other team as to who's supposed to get it.
Well, it does confuse. But if we actually, communicated.
It'll make a difference.
Yes.
So communication on the pickleball court looks like, hey, it's yours.
Or mine.
Or mine.
Yes.
That way we know, which lets me know this, right? Even on the pickleball court, communication requires a high level of intentionality.
Yeah.
Communication is actually a skill that needs to be practiced.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And here's the truth. A lot of times people don't grow up understanding the reality that communication is a skill to be learned. So many times people think that because, talking is like second nature to us. We're always talking, always having a conversation with someone. And so then we think that we're really good at it. But in reality, communication is a skill that you need to develop. And so then you get married or you're in a relationship and the dynamic is off. And what's the number one complaint that I hear, for example, when a couple comes into my office is, well, we're not understanding each other. We've got some communication issues. And as we're growing up, a lot of us grow up in environments where we don't really know that communication is a skill because we never observed that growing up. And our parents or our caretakers, they really try their best. I really believe that so many of us grow up in environments where our parents are really trying the best that they can, but they were also not taught that communication is a skill that needs to be taught, right? And we don't know what we don't know until we learn something different.
Right.
And so then you grow up as a child and you're observing your family members, in this environment. And guess what? That ends up becoming the way that you learn how to interact with the world. And so let's say you grow up in an environment where there's a lot of arguing. Maybe then you become the adult that is really good at expressing their anger in an unhealthy way, and then you can't have a proper conversation, or you grow up in that kind of environment and you learn how to shut down and now you don't know how to navigate conflict properly.
Right.
So communication is a skill that we actually have to develop.
Correct. I love what you just shared, especially because every time you like hear people, like let's say they're getting into relationships and they're saying, what's the one thing that you're looking for aside from, maybe physical attraction or whatever, you always hear the cliche, I just want somebody who knows how to communicate. And then oftentimes, like you said, we do think that we know how to communicate because we talk a lot, second nature.
Yeah.
But communication is not just verbal, right? Communication actually requires intentionality. It requires understanding. It requires listening. And I think one of the things that I began to realize is that most friendships, relationships, romantic relationships, they usually don't end because there's a lack of love. They usually end because there's a lack of skill in communication.
Yeah, that's right. I actually see this a lot in my therapy office, right? I see so many people that deeply care for each other, so many couples, so many friends, so many coworkers, so many people in relationships that actually really care for one another, but their relationship ends up unraveling because they don't know how to articulate their needs. They don't know how to properly express their frustration in a healthy way, and they don't even know how to talk in a way that the other person will understand. And the other person doesn't know how to express gratitude or validation towards them back in a way that they know how to receive. So we see a lot of these relationships that end up breaking apart, not because there's a lack of love, but because there's a lack of skill in knowing how to talk to one another.
Right. And it takes time to learn that skill.
It does.
So with that being said, I do want to take an opportunity and I want to talk about some of the pitfalls in communication, because I know that I said this episode 1, I know that the reason you fell in love with me is because of my masterful skill in communicating. But
okay.
But in the 7 years of our marriage, I have fallen in a lot of pits because of my lack of communication, my lack of skill in communication. I have said things that I wish I could take back. It's like squeezing toothpaste out of a bottle. You can't put it back in. It's like, no, why did I just say that? I wish what I said was different. I want to talk about some of the pitfalls. The reason I want to talk about it is because before we got married, we dated for a long time.
We did, and we were best friends for such a long time.
We were. So we met each other when we were 16.
Yeah.
We dated until we were 20. Then we got married years later, and then so we have known each other for a very long time. But prior to getting married, we were best friends. We spoke all the time.
Yeah.
I thought that communication was going to be easy. Okay. I remember getting married to you and thinking, I'm marrying my best friend. This is like exactly my other half. We speak the same language. 2 weeks into our marriage, we have an argument. And I have a moment where I begin to think to myself, who are you? I actually have no idea who you are, because I think for the first time we just experienced each other's lack of communication skill.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of the pitfalls in communication?
Well, I would say that you just mentioned one, right? And it's assuming that you know the other person better than you know, a lot of times we hear, I know them better than they know themselves. And that's just, not true. And it gives a lot of space for assumption.
Right.
Right. And then it's assuming that the other person can read your mind, because if they know me so well, then that means that I don't have to say that because they should know better.
Right.
Right. And that's just not the
mind
truth.
readers.
Exactly. None of us are mind readers. How many couples do I talk to that have been, married for so many years, or like us, they've known each other, practically grew up together, right? And have been together for so many years. And then, there's a frustration or resentment that is built up throughout time because of this assumption. Well, they should have known better. Right. They've known me for X amount of time. How did they not know? And that leaves a lot of room for assumption. So that's number one pitfall. And then there's also the pitfall of there being a lack of self-awareness.
Sheesh, yeah.
Right? So when we are not aware of ourselves,
right,
we're going to have a really hard time being able to connect to the other person. So for example, when I am not aware of my own downfalls and my communication skills, then I'm going to have a really hard time because I'm going to be overwhelmed with myself. And now I can't hold space for you or carry whatever feeling you're carrying. Right. And so one of the things that I see so often is, in couples, for example, that situations go from 0 to 100. Yeah. And I hear this so often, that just went from 0 to 100 so fast. And the reality is that things don't just go from 0 to 100. There's actually, it's like a speedometer, right? Like they go 10 and 20, 30, 50, until you get to 100. But when you have,
Well, sometimes
what?
you can go 0 to 100 real quick.
Oh my gosh. But when, but when you have an awareness, you already start feeling yourself rising. So by the time you're at 100, you are at a place where what we call you're flooded, you're feeling flooded or you're dysregulated, which means that you are so overwhelmed with whatever feeling that you're feeling that it's actually really hard for you to be able to communicate properly at that point. And that's why arguments, for example, can get very explosive, right? But when you have the awareness of like, ooh, I feel it inside of me, you'll have the awareness of saying, you know what, let's take a pause here. I'm going to walk away. Let's give ourselves 20 minutes and then we'll come back to this conversation. And that way you are in a better regulated space and you can actually talk. But when you do not have that awareness within yourself, then you don't have anything to contribute to the conversation.
Right. Right. And I think sometimes awareness too requires humility.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think we want to pause the conversation because we think the other person is incapable of having it because they're not speaking in the way that we would like.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the reason that we need to be aware is because we need to be okay with the reality that we ourselves are not capable of having that conversation.
Yeah.
So like we have found ourselves, like I'm thinking about moments where the two of us, where we've had, well, we don't argue. We verbally joust.
Okay.
How would you say it?
We argue.
We haven't. We have intense conversation. No, we definitely argue.
Intense. I like intense conversations.
We have intense conversations. Podcast episode number 3, maybe. No, we'll unpack all of our intense conversations. But I have found myself in many situations where I just feel personally dysregulated. I don't know what words to put together to finish my sentence. And sometimes I do need to step away and take a lap and maybe even pray and ask God to give me wisdom, to give me clarity, to settle my emotions so that I can come back and speak to you in a way where you feel loved.
And this reminds me of like very early on in our relationship, obviously, and we were young too, didn't know, the communication is a skill or anything. And I actually did not have the awareness that I would shut down.
Oh, you would? That's crazy. Let's talk about this because
hold on.
I feel like I noticed that. And go on. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Well, because I, always kind of like have known that you would call me very spicy, right? And so I always had something to say, or I can, like defend myself very well.
I meant because you were hot, not because.
Oh God. Okay. And, I can argue and I will argue, that's just kind of like the demeanor that I kind of grew up with. You have to kind of, protect yourself. Sure. And I didn't realize that in the context of our relationship, I would actually shut down when we would have difficult conversations. Do you remember that?
I do.
And then you would want to.
I was the opposite.
You were the complete opposite. You would want to talk. Like, we're going to talk about it right now.
Right now. Yeah.
And I'm like shutting down, trying to figure out, but why? I can't even think straight. Why can't I, say what I need to say?
And I would throw Bible verses at you. Like, don't let the sun go down on our anger.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. And, so that lack of self-awareness, I didn't realize, like in the moment when I was shutting down, I didn't realize I was, I didn't have the mental note of, oh, that's what's happening to me right now. I'm feeling so overwhelmed that my system is literally shutting down because the way I'm experiencing this argument is way too overwhelming for me.
Right.
And so now whenever we have a conversation and I'm starting to feel that speedometer, for example, coming up and I'm starting to feel flooded or dysregulated, now we have the safety in our relationship to say, you know what, right now is not a good, I don't have the capacity for this conversation. I'm starting to feel really dysregulated. Let's come back to this, in a couple of minutes, or I'm going to go take a walk and I'm going to come inside.
Right.
But it takes that type of skill. That within itself is a skill for us to develop, but that was a huge pitfall for us.
It was huge. And I think it's true because sometimes people do live on opposite spectrums like we did, right? So you would emotionally flood and because of that, you would shut down.
Yeah.
And I would want to tackle the situation head on, not because I was better at confronting
you were flooded
situation,
too.
but I was so flooded that I didn't want the issue to linger. Like I was too afraid to sit in the emotion that right now this is uncomfortable and that's okay.
Yeah.
And because I was desperate to get out of that situation and have a quick conversation, I would get impulsive. I will say things that I don't mean because I'm not emotionally regulated. I would want to tackle the issue Straight on. Okay, so we tackled two really great pitfalls, right? We talked about assumption,
Yeah.
being mind readers. You should never assume what the other person is thinking. You
No
should
matter
always
how
ask,
long you are
no
together.
matter how long you're together,
Yeah.
right? The other thing we just talked about was,
Having a lack of self-awareness.
right, it was having a lack of self-awareness. Now, the third thing, this one for me, I just think is very interesting. This is when we blame rather than just complain,
Ooh, that's good.
right? Because I think it's okay to complain, but if you can complain without blaming, I think it'll go a lot better. So, like for instance, I mean, this never happened in our marriage, babe. So this isn't about you, you know. But like, let's say for instance that I'm driving, you know, you know what I mean? Like, let's just say I just so happen to be driving in a car, and this never happened, you know. But just to say that somebody, your wife would say, "My gosh, you're the worst driver."
I've never said that to you.
Really?
Here I go saying never.
Well, yeah, exactly. But let's just say that somebody's like, "You're the worst driver ever," or like, well, "You always drive so fast." You know, maybe instead of saying you're the worst driver ever,
Actually,
you could say,
hold
"The
on.
way that you speed up makes me feel nervous."
I just want to say that that's not a good example in the context of our marriage because,
Well, I wasn't talking about our marriage.
okay, good, because you're actually a really slow driver.
Right. Exactly.
But that's a really good example.
But maybe a good way for you to say that, for you to express what you're feeling is, "Hey, I feel a lack of patience when we're not getting to work."
When we're not getting to work, getting to on time
Yeah.
because you drive really slow.
Exactly. Or maybe, here we go. Or maybe another one
Okay.
is, this doesn't happen
Okay.
in our marriage at all. Like, "Hey, you're always hogging the TV remote," where you could just say, not you, but just hypothetically speaking, someone could just say, "I feel like we never watch shows that I want to watch."
Okay, I love you, but can I correct you there for a little bit? So you're saying I feel like I don't get to watch shows. That's not a feeling. So
Oh,
to take it a step further, it would
yes.
be I feel frustrated
There it is.
because I don't get to watch what I want when we're watching TV together.
Got it. Okay. No, that's actually really good.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this just got like a little personal because we were talking about some specific examples in our marriage. But I think really here's the key. I think the key is, don't start conversations with you. Always start the conversations with me.
Yeah, that's a great skill.
Right? So it's never a good idea to be like, "You always, you always, you always." Right?
Or you never,
You never.
or you're so.
Right. I think it's always a better tool to start with, "Hey, this is the way that this is making me feel."
Or when you do or say blank, it makes me feel blank.
Right, correct.
That's a really good way to articulate what you're feeling because you're using a feelings
Right.
word. And then you're not casting blame. You're just informing the other person that this behavior impacts me in this way.
Yeah, totally. Okay, can I just like talk about maybe a vulnerable situation that comes up in our marriage often?
Oh, Lord.
And
I'm nervous.
No, well, it's me with I've gotten better.
Okay.
I had a phone problem.
Oh, you did.
I was addicted to the scroll, right? And then when I was home and I would do that with you, I think you always did a good job, right? Because every time I was like stuck on my phone scrolling, I think what helped me get better was you saying, "I feel like we're not connecting."
Yeah.
Or "I feel like we're not spending a lot of time together."
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of pitfalls, but I think there's hope, right? Because the hope is that we have great tools.
Yep,
Right.
we do.
And you are a marriage and family therapist, and I feel blessed to be married to you. Obviously, because I love you, you're my best friend, but you're also extremely intelligent. And I think I attribute a lot of the health in our marriage to you because
It's
you,
very sweet. I love you. But it's also
love you too.
attributed to the hard work
yeah,
that you have put in. And I actually want to take a moment to note that because I see so many people in the context of a therapy office. For example, a lot of individuals that come into therapy, and even statistically speaking, women seek out therapeutic services a lot more than men do. And that's just because of the toxic messaging, that we get, the taboo, of what therapy is, and also the way that men a lot of times grow up not believing that they're emotional beings. I'm just not that emotional. I'm more logical. And so the therapist, office oftentimes is for people who are quote unquote crazy or, like
Right.
they're just on the brink, or, they have to be mentally ill of some sort to get into a therapist office. And I just have been blown away by your drive and your vulnerability and your openness to do the work, and to be open to what that looks like and to lay down your pride and your humility. And I think that you're such an amazing example to other men of destigmatizing what this process looks like. You've sought out therapy individually, which you're still doing every week. You see a coach. You're doing everything that you can to grow as a man emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in every single way possible. And I think that you serve as such an amazing example of that.
Thanks, babe. That means a lot.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I went on that journey is because I realized that I was struggling to communicate. And the reason I was struggling is because there were some deep rooted issues.
Yeah.
There were some deep feelings that I was feeling, and I never learned how to attach words to what I was actually feeling.
Yeah. We were talking about this today, actually. And how I think that me starting to become a therapist, like at that pivotal point in our relationship, it really transformed us because it was teaching me a lot of skill, right? And that then we would have these conversations about, and I think it drove us. I think it was like the starting point for both of our healing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. Well, I'm grateful to continue healing with you and to
Aw.
continue growing with you. I'm a better man, honestly, because of you, and this has been, full on transparency. And this is just even outside of our marriage. I think we have great stability in our marriage, and I'm super grateful for that. But outside of our marriage, it's been one of the hardest seasons,
Yeah.
but also one of the most healing seasons I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
And it's because of the push and the encouragement that you've been giving me to seek help to get better with my therapist and with my coach and with my personal trainer. Shout outs to Rebecca, I'm just really, really grateful to be a part of this healing. And here's what I know. Healing is not just for us,
That's right.
right? We want to be a conduit for healing. And I think because of your career, you have such an amazing opportunity to walk people towards healing. And I think sometimes healing can sound very like mystical, but I think there's actually practical tools for healing. And you use a lot of these tools with your clients in therapy, and you've also taught them to me. So I'm positive that if we have struggled with communication, and we still do sometimes today, that maybe there's people today who are watching and you're struggling to properly communicate with a significant other, somebody they love, their husband, their wife, their kids, their employees, or people at work. What are some tools that you would say would be extremely helpful to help people get out of the pits of a lack of communication?
Oh, I love that. I love that question. And I love that people are going to get to walk away with some like tangible, practical tools. I think the first one that comes to my mind is, and this is taught by some of the leading experts in my field, they're called the Gottmans, and they coined the term, it's the 1 rule, 3 skills. So the 1 rule of communication above anything else is mutual understanding. So the point of our conversation, the point of this conversation that you and I are about to have, has to always be mutual understanding. It's not about you being right and me being wrong.
Right.
It's not about me proving my points. It's not about you just listening to me. It's about us walking away with a deeper sense of knowledge of who the other person is and their experience and what they were feeling.
Love that.
So that's the rule, okay? Mutual understanding. And then there's 3 skills. The first skill is us being able to express our feelings, being able to articulate what it is that we are feeling. And this is such an important one because a lot of times we have an inability to communicate effectively because we lack the words to put to our feelings. So a lot of us are just stuck with happy, sad, angry, right? Like we're limited. Our vocabulary is limited to those emotions. And there's so many different emotions that we can attach to what we're actually experiencing. And a lot of people don't have that skill. So that's the first skill that you have to develop. Learn how to articulate what it is that you're feeling. You have to have a level of connection to yourself. You have to have a level of self-awareness in order for you to be able to express that. Because sometimes we get so frustrated and we feel like nobody understands us, but a lot of times nobody understands us because we actually are not doing a good job in being able to express and articulate what it is that we are feeling. One of my favorite things to do in session is bring out the feelings wheel. I actually have a pillow with the feelings wheel on it, and it seems so childish and so practical, but it's actually life-changing. How many times, and it makes me feel so proud every time a client is like, you know what? I don't know how I'm feeling today. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up my feelings wheel, And they're like, actually, today I'm feeling numb, or today I'm feeling disconnected, or today I'm feeling, frustrated, and they are able to articulate an emotion that before they would have just said, oh, I just think I'm sad, So that's one skill. And then the next skill is asking open-ended questions. Right? So when we are in a conversation and we're trying to communicate, the only way to really jump into the other person's inner world is by asking open-ended questions. So if I'm expressing to you, I feel frustrated at this, instead of you asking me like yes or no questions, but why? Or, but when I did this, is that what you felt? Right? You ask open-ended questions. Okay, hold on a second. Tell me the story about that. Right? Or tell me what it is that is the catastrophe that you're experiencing inside of your head right now. Right? And you ask questions that lead with curiosity in order for you to be able to get a deeper understanding of what it is that I am experiencing. And then the last skill is being able to express empathy. I don't think that a lot of people know that empathy is actually a skill. Like, me being able to validate your feelings is a skill, and people think, oh, well, I'm such an empathetic person, but then they don't know how to articulate that or express that in the context of of an argument, let's say, or a discussion with someone else. And that's because it's a skill. So you being able to express validation to someone is the third skill, and it's so crucial.
It is crucial. And I honestly think that in our communication journey, the most difficult thing for me was validating.
Yeah. And it's not because you were not an empathetic person. You're an incredibly empathetic person, right? But expressing empathy requires you jumping into someone else's experience, even when you don't have the same experience yourself.
Right.
Or maybe you had a different recollection of the events that took place, or you had a different interpretation. You developing the skill of empathy will help you jump into that person's perspective and say, you know what? From your perspective, I totally understand why you feel this way. And that is so valid. So developing that skill of being able to validate someone else's experience, even when you had a different one.
Right. I love that. And I think one of the reasons that it was very difficult for me, because like you said, like if we were in the middle of an argument and we saw it from a completely different lens, we had a completely different opinion. You thought one way, I thought another way. I was convinced I was right. You were convinced you were right. The reason it was difficult for me to validate you was because I thought that validation meant agreement.
That's right.
And it is possible to validate somebody else's feelings without actually agreeing with them. When I found this out, this was life-changing for me, because I thought that I had to let go of what I felt was right in order to just make you happy. So usually before I learned the art of validation and you told me that you were upset about something, it was just like, okay, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Sorry. Okay, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Sorry. And then I found myself getting into a place where I was apologizing and not even knowing why I was actually apologizing.
Yeah. And even saying you're right, completely diminishes, for example, the rule. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about us understanding each other. So you jumping into my inner world and understanding me, and me jumping into your inner world And when we're able to express that to each other, that's the life-changing part, where now you feel validated and I feel validated, even though we had completely different recollections or experiences.
It is. And I would like to talk about one of the practical tools that I learned to help me with validation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'm never going to forget this. It was actually the first therapist we ever saw together.
Yes.
And it was was it a metaphor?
It was an acronym.
Okay, an acronym
It was an acronym,
that he
yeah.
taught you. Yeah.
And I remember sitting with a group of guys, some of my best friends. There was a point in time where we were meeting almost every week, just talking about being a man that follows after God and also being a man who loves their wife well. And we were all talking about this concept of validation. And I felt so cool because I had this tool in my pocket. And I was like, all right, boys, well, let me show you how to do this,
Hold on, I just want to pause. I love how you said I had this. That's such a therapy thing. I had this tool in my tool belt.
I had this tool in my tool belt, Okay, so the name of the acronym, the acronym spells out Arvis. Arvis. Arvis isn't a real word. Well, it is now. I mean, you can use it. We should coin it. Arvis. And Arvis is an acronym for the following. And these are some steps that I try to put into play every time, or almost every time, we're in a disagreement, right? So especially like when I am in a place where my emotions are regulated and I'm not super angry or upset, when I'm in a place where I feel settled and I can think clearly, I try to apply this, Arvis. So the A stands for ask, right? So there's been a lot of times where we are having conversations, maybe it's a disagreement or an argument, and one of the things that you say is, I just don't feel understood. I don't feel understood. I don't feel understood. So I ask, hey, what did you mean? Or can you repeat that for me one more time? Can you say why you're upset? Can you express your feelings one more time in a way that I can understand it? I ask, and then once I feel like I understood what you're saying, I repeat it verbatim. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that the reason that you're feeling upset is because I leave my clothes on the floor, or the reason that you feel upset is because you're carrying the mental loads of our home. Is that correct? And if you say yes, that's correct, I'll move on to the next one. But if you don't say no, that's not why, I go back to A and I ask, and I'm like, okay, so can you repeat yourself one more time?
And can I just pause you there really quick? Because a lot of times, and I see this so often, every time I see my couples in therapy, this is I receive so much resistance to this part, or to this skill, when I'm trying to teach someone this skill, because it almost feels like redundant.
Yep.
And then it also feels like the conversation has to go so much slower.
Right.
And that's the point.
Right.
You want to be able to slow down.
Right.
Because if you can slow down, then you can listen. You can actively listen.
Right.
And then you can, validate and do all the...
For sure. But also slowing down can also be, it could also be frustrating for the person who is offended or hurt in the conversation.
Of course.
Right. But you're also required to slow down so that you can allow the other person to step into your world.
Correct.
Because it doesn't just happen in a moment.
Yeah.
It's actually a process. It's a skill.
Yeah.
Right. So we ask, we repeat, and once I repeat it, if you say that I got it correct, I validate.
Yeah.
I begin to say, I totally can see why my actions made you upset. If I were in your shoes, I would be upset as well. And I am so sorry that this is what I did. I totally understand why you're upset. And then once you feel validated, then the other person has a turn to express their feelings. So Arvis, next is to inform. That's once you validated the other person's feelings, then you have won the right to inform them of your perspective and why you reacted the way you reacted, or why you saw what you saw, right? So after I validate you, I get to tell you my lens. Hey, this is what I saw. This is how I experienced it. I now put the ball in your court, and I
do the same thing.
I allow you the opportunity to ask, repeat, and validate. And once we find equal validation, we move to S. We find a solution.
Yep.
So the next time we're in this situation, how would you like for me to respond? And we come up with a solution together, and then we move forward. That has been a cheat code for our marriage. Does it work 100% of the time? No. Not because Arvis is not a great tool. Usually it's because our emotions are out of control.
Yeah. And I love Arvis, and I know that's something that we've been practicing for a long time. But I think another skill that is important for us to remember is that the way that a conversation starts, the way that we choose to start a conversation, it really matters. Research actually shows that the way that you start a conversation, so the tone, the demeanor, what you're saying, how you're saying it, the way that you choose to start a conversation will actually dictate how that conversation ends. And so another skill that I love to teach people, whether you're, in a couple or in a friendship or in whatever relationship, is the softened startup. That's another term coined by the Gottmans. And it's knowing how to approach the conversation in a way that will help the other person not be defensive. So approaching the conversation with the skill that we talked about earlier, using the I statements instead of the you statements, and then laying down the foundation of what the goal is. And what is the goal? Which is the number one rule: mutual understanding. So if you think about it, when a person comes to you and they come to you with a complaint, right, but their tone is in the right place and they're just saying, hey, I really want to have a conversation about XYZ and the way that that impacted me. That way we can understand each other. You're not going to go into that conversation, with a defense. Now, you're actually going to want to be open to what the other person has to say, so that then, you guys can have a productive conversation. You're not going to feel so defensive or on guard, or like you need to protect yourself in that conversation. So practicing that softened startup, knowing how to actually approach the conversation in a way that will ease the other person and not make them feel like they need to defend themselves.
That's so good. You're brilliant. And you're beautiful.
Oh.
I love you too. But I was thinking this too. I love how you said that the way you start a conversation really matters. But I think I've come to understand that the way that you choose to end a conversation actually matters as well.
Yeah.
It really, really matters. I joked around about it earlier when I threw that verse around. But there is this verse in the Bible that says, do not let the sun go down on your wrath or on your anger. But if we take that like super literal, by the way, I think it is literal, but we have had many nights where we have gone to bed without resolving the problem.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what that scripture meant.
Mm-hmm.
I think what that scripture meant was, don't stay there.
Exactly.
Don't
Don't let so many nights go by.
Don't let so many nights go by where you have issues unresolved.
And there's also a way for you to pause. Hey, let's
Right.
put a pin on this conversation. We don't have the emotional capacity to carry it
Right.
through. So we're going to put a pin on it and we're going to talk about it again tomorrow. Sometimes that's the wisest thing that you can do, because otherwise, when you are sleep deprived and you're up all night and you're trying to, resolve a problem, it's only going to intensify the situation.
100%.
So sometimes, putting it to rest, putting a pin on it, choosing to end that conversation on the same page,
Right.
so saying, okay, we both agree that right now we kind of have to put this on pause.
Right. And I love what you just said, because when you put a pin on it, you're almost isolating the issue and you're not making it your marriage.
Yeah.
Right. When you say, hey, you know what, let's take this conversation and let's put a pause on it. You guys are both acknowledging, hey, you know what, like, you're actually not my enemy. The enemy here is actually this problem. And we need to figure out how we can resolve this problem together. And I think the reason we can't let the sun go down on our anger is because the longer we go with unforgiveness in our heart, the more separation we experience.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what the enemy does. The goal of the enemy is to divide you, right? And the goal of Jesus is reconciliation. I mean, that's the gospel right there, right? Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Why? To reconcile our relationship with God, to reconcile our vertical relationship. Why? So that from that place we can live at peace in our horizontal relationships. And specifically, I mean, I think we should take the opportunity to talk about marriage, as we're coming to a close, because I really do think that's the one relationship that the enemy really, really wants to divide. Why? Because in many ways, marriage is the perfect picture of the relationship that God has with his people as it relates to covenant, right? Covenant is a promise. This is why weddings happen. We're making a promise that no matter the issue, as long as there's not certain situations, but no matter the issue, we are going to remain together. We're not going to make the problem the thing that's going to lead the relationship. We're going to
Yeah.
have a relationship actually lead the problem.
Yeah. And as a therapist, I just feel the need to say, obviously, this does not apply to the context of abuse.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely not.
any type of abuse.
Any type of abuse at
Yeah.
all. Any type of abuse. For the most part, I think Jesus desires reconciliation,
Yeah.
right? And this is a life, by the way, that I also think Jesus himself lived, right? I think Jesus lived through many moments of being offended with people, and he took that opportunity to practice and express forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right. And when we have conversations, what we're doing is that we're creating a pathway for forgiveness to occur. I usually say this, conversations that lack skill can create offense. And when you live in offense, you build offense. You build offense. An offense creates separation, but a conversation is a pathway to forgiveness, which lowers that fence so that we can walk together in unity into everything that God has for us.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that developing the skill is a journey.
Right.
You know, and it's not somewhere that you arrive. We've been together for a really long time, but we've done so much life together. And we both have gone on journeys where we've been healthy individuals, you know, in a healthy relationship, and we still get this wrong. You know, we still find ourselves sometimes, you know, having a tiff, you know. So it's a journey just because you are developing that skill, and we have to adjust. Different seasons bring out different parts of us, you know. We're on a constant growth journey. And I think that sometimes we can be listening, and maybe there's people that could get discouraged because their relationships, maybe they have a friendship where they just can't get each other, or, you know, a relationship at work, or a marriage, you know, that is on the rocks because they just don't seem to understand each other. My challenge would be, start learning the skill yourself.
Right.
Start trying to implement that skill yourself. Change initiates change. So when you change in your relationship, you show up different to your relationship, and that's going to create a change in the dynamic of your relationship.
Yeah.
So, you know, hold on to hope and try to develop these skills.
Absolutely. Well, I am extremely excited to continue growing with you.
Yes. me too.
Growing in the art of communication. And I just want to say thank you for recording episode 2 of Conversations Create Change with Mike and Steph. And I also want to take an opportunity and say thank you to you guys for watching, for joining us, for listening, and for joining us in on the conversation. Do us a favor. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page. Follow us on Instagram. We believe your best days are in front of you, and we can't wait to see you for episode 3 of Conversations with Mike and Steph.